Al-Hol is probably one of the most scariest places in the world right now because it's packed full of ISIS sympathizers or people who are connected to ISIS. The troops that are trying to keep control of the camp regularly carry out raids. They have to, because they're trying to stop the build-up of arms and weapons. Trying to break up the gangs that are operating in there, largely run by ISIS, but they're also searching for captives. The slaves are almost always Yazidis. The Yazidis are a minority ethnic religious group, mainly from Kurdistan in Iraq. And they have faced persecution over centuries. To understand how they got there, we probably have to go back to the beginning of ISIS. There was a wave of countries who had popular uprisings against usually dictatorial regimes that had been in power for a long time. And Syria was one of a number that caught this fever of toppling.
The first demonstrations began in March in Damascus. They quickly spread to Deraa and elsewhere.
The Syrian regime tried in the early phases to suppress the uprising.
On one day in April, protesters say 22 people were killed in Deraa alone.
Across Syria, thousands are still daring to demonstrate despite the dangers and the rising death toll. Grainy videos posted online show doves being released into the air at one protest, a plea for peace, but the government's brutality goes on.
And that created this pretty dynamic standoff between those who were now peeling away pretty dramatically from the regime and those who were loyal to the regime and who were prepared to defend it at all costs.
The jet has flown over several times and is dropping bombs. So you can see very, very close. There it goes again. Just pure intimidation for the people of this area. There it goes.
That's my house.
I can't remember exactly when ISIS came, because right at the beginning, it was a rebel civilian popular uprising. That went on for at least a couple of years.
There seems to be a lot of discussion going on at the moment about exactly what to do, but the army are on the hill. The reports are that they are withdrawing. Certainly there's a lot of infighting between them. These men are just working out when and how to push forward.
The first time I saw a lot of men clad in black was the end of 2013, beginning of 2014.
They are flying the flag of jihad or holy war. The Syrian rebels in the north are tougher and stronger than ever before, but there are increasing signs they're becoming more radicalized too.
Groups like that were the beginning of a new form of extremism. And as they grew and they merged with other groups and became stronger, very little stood in their way. The Yazidis are a very small ethnic religious group. There are only about 1 million of them worldwide, with the bulk of them primarily in Iraq or Syria. They're very inward-looking in terms of they don't marry outside of that group. They tend to stick within their own community. They have a number of religious traditions.
The Yazidis have a long history of more than 4,000 years. They are not Muslims and they are not Christians. They believe in God and 7 angels. And they have a peacock angel, which is the highest angel in the Yazidi beliefs. And he is an active ruler of the world. God is more passive in the background. Sometimes in the Islamic theology, they mention they are worshippers of evil, which is not right. They believe in God.
Every Yazidi is meant to visit Lalish at least once in their lifetime. The site dates back thousands of years. It's very pretty. It's got ancient tombs and shrines. There are springs which they consider sacred. What struck me was how small it was. And I suppose that was symptomatic of how small the religion is.
When we come here, we believe that there is God. We feel like pure, we feel relaxed, we feel comfortable in this place.
We believe that this is a holy place, and everywhere that we go through is holy, so we don't wear shoes.
To you, what does being a Yazidi mean?
We believe that our religion is pure, so we don't accept anyone to come and join our religion because we believe that we are complete and we don't need anyone to join us.
I think the Yazidis led not only a very simple life, it was based on very simple desires, but it also, they were very rural. That meant, I think, that they were peculiarly vulnerable to an attack from anyone, never mind an organization like ISIS, which was hell-bent on their destruction.
أيها المسلمون إن الله تبارك وتعالى خلقنا.
What underpinned ISIS was their system of beliefs and their laws around the whole caliphate, and it explained their attitude to the Yazidis. Al-Baghdadi, as the head caliph at that point, he really had a penchant for dramatics because he chose Mosul, chose the altar of the old mosque in the old city to deliver this declaration of a caliphate.
ووفقهم ومكنهم لتحقيق غايتهم فسارعوا إلى إعلان الخلافة وتنصيب إمام، وهذا واجب على المسلمين، واجب قد ضيع لقرون وغاب عن واقع الأرض فجهله كثير من المسلمين.
I suppose the way to think about a caliphate is it's an alternative system of governance.
الإسلام.
In a caliphate, you have the Khalif, who is the ruler. and all executive power resides within that caliph, who essentially extrapolates and interprets Islamic rules according to their understanding, and they impose those rules over society.
They used a sword. They put a block of wood underneath his hand, put his hand on it and said, "This stole a car battery." They didn't say he was an orphan. They said, "This hand is stolen," and he had to be punished, and they cut his hand off.
They are sights you can never unsee. Sights which have become shockingly common in Raqqa. Public amputations of legs and arms for thieving and other crimes.
ISIS even brought back crucifixions. People were crucified at times. Persecution of homosexuals, throwing them off buildings, stoning them.
All praise be to Allah.
They put out what were basically execution videos. They made a lot of their captives do these awful, heart-rending videos, and then they filmed their deaths. Humanitarians, journalists, volunteers in some cases.
These kinds of, again, very extreme punishments were really important to ISIS. It was important to ISIS because, as far as they were concerned, this was a marker that they were laying down of their legitimacy, of their uncompromising nature to say, we don't care what you think. This is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it.
ISIS fighters spread about this myth that somehow the Yazidis were infidels. They basically weren't seen as human in their eyes.
It exists within their propaganda materials and their books and their magazines and so on. And therefore, ISIS set about en masse rounding up the Yazidis wherever they could, killing the men, taking the women and children, in many cases, as we know, rendering a lot of them into sexual slavery as well.
Gathering in their temples, followers of one of the world's oldest religions prepare to flee into the desert, driven out by a simple threat from Islamic extremists: convert or die.
ISIS seemed to have set about destroying the Yazidis in a quite methodical manner.
Chilling reports describe ISIL militants rounding up families, conducting mass executions, and enslaving Yazidi women.
Attacks by the Islamic State on the mainly Yazidi communities drove tens of thousands of people to seek safety in the barren Sinjar mountains.
There was suddenly this huge exodus of people trying to climb up and get out of harm's way and get up to the top of Mount Sinjar.
Clearly, there is an absolutely desperate situation in Iraq, particularly on this mountainside. I'm proud of the fact that British aeroplanes and British aid have been playing a role and will continue to play a role to help these people. But we need a plan to get these people off that mountain and get them to a place of safety.
They rounded up the whole community. They told them that they had to convert or they'd be killed. And they killed hundreds just in a single day. It left a massive scar on the Yazidi population forever. And if you go to Kocho now, it looks like it's a town frozen in time.
إنه بركة داعش بمعنى خوشو هم عواكري بس نها هم إخسنا خراكرين يعني وكون جد بينن وأف غرفة مازن يا في عالم تيران بس نوا أو يعني مهبانة بتشتاق تاتي شعورك قالك بزحمته بس يعني وكو فالماكي هردي من بيشتابن منه كتكارنيام وقتي أسشلوت لاعبي ملكي داري ومتشتكرها متشتل بيشتابن منها بس نها يعني نزازم كزلام لي بنيرب تاعني نزام سرب بباي بهن كي هم موسى خراكنا ومتشتب زحمة بوي
A lot of destruction in these houses and these homes. And this used to be a big, thriving centre of a village. It's not the damage that's most striking. It's the fact that it's so empty. It's like a ghost town. There's a bit of feeling like you're right in the middle of history. The events that happened in 2014 are going to be studied and researched and learnt from for decades.
I
heard that there's an extraordinary story about how you survived.
إيش مزري أمشي الزلامول أشوي شيء زلامي أم بيشة شجرة زقال شارت القلم ده نزل مزري دمام.
This kind of events impact your psychology, the way of how your brain is working. So the structure of your brain became changed. So you always be scared. It means they are not able to forget it. Trauma and trauma event will be always a part of their life.
10 years on, there are still mass graves which have not yet been fully excavated.
أفيك مقبرة كجيه كتي أفجيه كتي تهاتينا كشتني يعني وقت جماعين أفجيها كجي أف دين نفسه دوراوي قرتينا أوجي جيها كول داخلي بكوريشته أوجي جيها.
We were shown a number, actually, of mass graves where they believed there are relatives and bones of loved ones. How many people did they suspect was killed here?
نيفا تشارج ستو بينجي حتى بيسد الهامو مقبرة دش برا دورا كوچو غلق مقبرة ديد وكوان هاينا شكان جدا فاكرينا وبرينا بغداد بس تشتاق جيرانا كنا وان هستي وانا جيرانا وكارن بيجين يعني غلق مقابر الشنغال هاينا وكوان هما إنه هتان هنا هاتنا فاكرون تشتاق جيرانا كنا.
There's such a desperation to find answers and to find relatives that have just disappeared, that there are attempts to collect DNA, to try and match up the living Yazidis with remains of people which are turning up in the dozens and dozens of mass graves that have been excavated. Who was missing in your family? The impression I got was that it was very dysfunctional. There didn't seem to be much connectivity between the different groups who were excavating the graves, collecting the DNA, collecting all the names and numbers. All there seemed to be in common was a slither of hope that somehow this would lead to something.
إجراءات تشتبه إجراءات جعلات نينام فوساتا بقول فوساتي وان برينن يعني تقريبا جبت سالات عنها لا شكش مقبرة بجونا نيناتا بيسدون نفرقون تانا تسدو ونزا سدو نول تشتغل عشان نجمعنا تانا يعني بيسدون نفريا بيجو نحسالا تشتغلنا شو جعلات نين
Do you think the world is in danger of forgetting what's happened to the Yazidis?
از بینم خطوره كما زنها إجبارها كهيرو هو السري مجتمعي مهات كعالم بيفرانا بو كمساعدة وانكرن أم نزان كاكيرت السري قال مجتمع دي أسهيفينا كم كابب سري بب.
They say they're heading to the capital. Waving the black and white flag of the Islamic State, they parade through the streets in cars they've seized from the Iraqi army.
Probably from about mid-2014 to late 2015, that's really the moment which ISIS is strongest it's been, is holding the most territory it's had, but also it is attracting people, hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world who are flocking to be part of this project.
All know who you are, from the capital, up north, Midlands, wherever you may be.
There were often really elaborate attempts to persuade people to come and join them, sometimes on an individual basis on Facebook or on some other social media platform, talking to usually young women a lot to coerce them into coming and being an ISIS bride.
Shamima Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 friends to join Islamic State in Syria. They became the poster girls for the prolific IS recruiting machine.
Or young men to come and fight for the good of Islam.
Ranting for the camera and ripping up their passports, these Islamist fighters promise more towns and cities will fall to ISIS.
They even put out videos of just how peaceful everything was and how green and lush and good the living was.
Here it is. Here's our caliphate. Lots of soft image, filmic pieces of children playing on the banks of Euphrates, of barbecues with families of fighters getting together to have food and these kinds of things.
And when people took up that call or were coerced into joining, they often said as soon as they arrived, they realized they'd been duped.
The sinister black flag of ISIS now flies above the hydroelectric dam.
As a terror organization, they were expert at not only terrorizing, but also churning out that cash. It was like billions that they were making.
It also marks their control of oil fields.
Inside their territory, they could do anything they wanted, especially with those that they captured. So the first thing that struck me when I first met Kovan, given that she was now 10 years on from being a teenager when she was first captured, was just how much of a child she still looked. She was still at school, she was from a big family, and she was obviously very family-orientated, as a lot of Yazidis are. She told me she was in the kitchen cooking when she heard that ISIS was very close, and the fear and the shock of trying to grab whatever they could. They split up, with the older and the younger ones going in a car, and the more fit ones, like her, going on foot, all trying to get up to Mount Sinjar.
أخذونا لزونا بنص الطريق لزونا وأخذونا على حدود سوريا حطونا مدرسة هناك 9 أيام يعني مع الجميع.
When you were first taken, you were only 14. What were your first feelings, emotions when you realised you've been taken by ISIS?
شعوري والله حيل خير يعني خفنا يعني حيل خفنا والله. ورا المدرسة ورا 9 أيام فرقونا من أهاليتنا. جابونا باصات وساعدونا بيهن وفرقونا من أهاليتنا. خلوا الزلم وحد والنسوان وحد والبنات وحد عزلوهم. احنا البنات ودونا على الموصل، احنا يعني القسم ودونا على تل عفر.
Kovan's first introduction to ISIS was basically being taken to a building where a number of other young girls were and being put up for auction.
كان حاطين يعني حراس يعني علينا، يعني هم الدواعش بس يعني كان يعني حارس يعني علينا. كان يحرس. أنا يعني ما ننهزم كان يحرسون علينا. إيه. كان يجون يعني يعني يختارون يعني واحد تعجبه ياخذها يروح يوديها يعني ببيته أو بالمضافة وينام وياها يعني يغتصبها.
Kovan, at basically still aged 14, was bought by someone who was considered to be a senior ISIS person or an emir. And she was made to be the family's slave.
كان نخدم لهم وكل شيء يعني كنا نسوي لهم كان يعني يقولون كان يقول لي يعني أنت يعني سبية أنت خدامة هيك كان يقول لي أيوة وكنت يعني كان كل ما يعني يجون بالمطاف يجتمعون يعني هم يجتمعون بالمطاف هم الدواعش كان يعني يريدني يعني أنا أقدم لهم من الأكل والشرب أني كان يريدني وبعدين يعني كان يقتلني يعني إذا من مثلا بالمضافة وهاي يعني كان يقتلني دائما يعني يحكي علي وهاي دائما كان هو هيك كان يعني يريدون نلبس لهم يعني لبس عاريات كان يعني يجتمعون بالمضافة ونقدم لهم يعني أكل وشاي والمي كان هيك يعني يريدونه وداني عليه واغتصبني هو بالمضافة عشت وياه سنتين.
Kovan endured a serious amount of abuse on almost every level that you can think of, not just physical, but also seriously mental abuse as a child.
If you under threat for a long time, for months and sometimes even for years, your personality started to change because you recognize you're helpless and you have no control about your body and you have no control about your mind. Your memory is just working on them. And it's kind of neurons firing 24 hours. You have no time to rest. Always you are busy with this trauma. You can become a post-traumatic stress disorder, plus depression or anxiety, for example. And if it's continued longer, psychosomatic disorders like a headache, different kind of psychological pains, and you're not able to have a future. Most of the people became suicidal or they're thinking they don't want to live anymore because it's so hard to accept this.
She was very matter-of-fact in many ways, disturbingly lack of emotion over the most horrendous things that the men were doing to her. But she got really angry when I asked her about the women, the wives of the ISIS fighters.
So نسوانهم مثلهم يعني تصرفاتهم مثل تصرفات يعني زلمهم يعني دواعش هم كان يعني دائما كانوا يقتلونا ويحكون علينا ويرزلون بيا كان هم يحطون المكياج هم كانوا يلبسونا إلهم زلمهم لما يغتصبونا كان هيك يسوون بينا كان كلهم كانوا يدرون كلهم يدرون بهذا الشيء يعني زلمهم اغتصبونا احنا يعني حتى يعني حمشت بيديوهم يعني حتى روحي والله كرهته يعني حمشت بيديوهم كان لين كانوا يتصرفون هيك يعني بينا كان هم يعني يتصرفون يعني بينا يعني كان لين مو زين يعني كان هيك يسوون بينا من يبيعونا ويغتصبونا يعني حتى نفسياتنا تعبت ولا حتى الروح يعني روحنا كرهنا والله.
p.m. at a side entrance to the Bataclan concert hall.
Fellow citizens, what happened yesterday in Paris and Saint-Denis near the Stade de France was an act of war.
Go to the emergency exit at the tarmac, please.
The people I am with here certainly believe that there is a terrorist attack.
Terror had returned to the UK. This time the target was children and their families.
All acts of terrorism are cowardly attacks on innocent people.
ISIS has this messianic component to it, which means it is a hostage to ideology.
The driver of the lorry zigzagged up the Promenade des Anglais, aiming for people deliberately.
It couldn't take a rational view that From its perspective, it was onto a good thing. It was holding its territory and it was in a relatively strong position. So it continued to attack the West. And that obviously created this huge political momentum in the broader West to go in and to topple ISIS.
ISIL is not a problem restricted to just one region. It has murderous plans to expand its borders well beyond Iraq and Syria. This is a problem that affects us all, and we must tackle it together.
I think ISIS probably did what maybe hadn't been done since the World Wars, was that it drew together a huge coalition of different countries, around about 80 of them, all fighting for one thing, and that was to crush this extremist Islamist militant group.
The Iraqi military's claiming back Mosul street by street.
It was absolute chaos in Mosul, because we were right in the middle of a city.
That sound is a sound of a sniper that's been bedded in for, well, the best part of a day and a night. Yo, and it's got the front window there. Well, we're going to have to pull out, because he has got us in his sights.
It was very urban warfare. So you were in amongst people's houses, and a lot of the areas, there were still people there.
At the Iraqi front lines, on the edge of the old city, IS jihadis are fighting to the death. An IS flag is 50 meters away from Iraqi police and soldiers. They're held back by jihadi snipers, but they have helicopters as backup.
It was mostly an aerial campaign that the Global Coalition Against ISIS did, working with local partners on the ground.
There'd be helicopter gunships overhead. You'd see jets sweeping down, dropping airstrikes, whilst ISIS people would, there seemed to be a pattern of staying behind and then hitting them from behind.
It's the second car bomb they've had within about half an hour.
ISIS was pulling back and splintering and obviously just scattering, leaving everything behind. So you'd go into the houses that they'd occupied and you'd see the enormous lengths that they'd gone to secure positions. Daesh lived in here. The Islamic State lived in here. And you can see a bunker. You come in right inside. A tunnel, actually. A tunnel. As ISIS was contracting and being pushed back, they took what they could with them, and some of their precious possessions were Yazidis. Every Yazidi will know about Baghouz because it was the last slice of ISIS territory, and many Yazidis were taken there. Most people weren't, myself included, did not really comprehend how many people were still in Baghouz when it finally fell. And suddenly you saw this huge number of people, men, women, and lots of children sort of flooding out of this tiny bit of land that ISIS no longer held. So you can imagine in that huge movement of people who were being taken under guard by the coalition troops, how easy it was to hide Yazidis. Baghouz is still there. It's like a scar on the landscape. When we went with the troops, they treated it like they were going back into hostile territory. There was a huge convoy to take us, the Sky crew, with a range of troops all kitted up and armed, speeding through the villages around there. IS controlled this very, very oil-rich region. It's got some of the biggest oil fields in Syria in it. And there was an almighty race to try and reclaim control of it. This area now is springing up again with multiple ISIS sleeper cells which are attacking them. In 2019, when the coalition troops, headed by the Kurds, recaptured Baghouz, they took charge of thousands of ISIS fighters. They put all the adult men into prisons. They just went straight away to prisons, generally. And they took the women and children off to Al-Hol camp, where they set up this heavily guarded camp for all the families who were connected with ISIS or who'd been found in ISIS territory. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces control Al-Hol camp and the other camp in that area. And they're supported by the coalition, but they are basically left to their own devices to run the show. When we're talking about Al-Hol camp, it is not a small little French summer camp or a British holiday camp. It's bigger than some British cities. At one stage, it had 70,000 people in it. So we're talking about a huge, huge, huge area. Very easy to hide frightened captives. Also, make, smuggle, and, secrete away contraband like weapons and even bombs. This is known as the most dangerous camp in the whole world, with the largest known collection or gathering of ISIS people left. In fact, it's so dangerous in Zone 5 that this area is known as the caliphate. The camp leaders know that there are Yazidis hidden in this camp. They just don't know exactly who they are and how to get them out. Kovan was found during a typical night raid. They didn't expect to find her. She was found with 2 children. Every time someone claims they're Yazidi, there's a huge, rigorous sort of amount of questioning that goes on just to confirm that they are.
فأنتي بأي قسم كنتي؟ الثالث لحالك؟ إيه عم بعد المصاري إيه لسه عم تتواصل.
After quite a few years, she was finally rescued and taken away to a Yazidi safe house.
راستي يعني تشتكي كجن بجنيد حسم راسته، بس يعني تشتكي قلك ينخوشه، يعني شعورك ينخوشه إنه أفتع داوا ورسري جني أف قتلاوال سرسري جني وركرن، يعني قلك عذاب نخوش يعني مرة راستي جي خمجينية، أما أجي قلت تشتكي مكاريب وبكا يجبو فانجنا يعني تشتي جوج دسي مهاجي أزي بكم وأزدكم جيان واتش بيترجي بدسي مورجي أزي الكاريا بانجنا بكم.
Nalin comes from a family of Yazidis who've made it their life purpose to try and track down fellow Yazidis who were held captive.
دفردا مدوي دميدا يعني دحزارو نوزدا هذا وتشتكي وهابو قالك يزيدي هاتن راستي شو تشاغي يعني أما الريا مالا يزيدياره تشارسد وبيست وحيش كاس جزاروك جلجن جيكاتش هاتي رزقار كرن.
She basically gives them their first glimpse of sanctuary after a decade of or more of captivity.
يعني هاوك كوفان هاتي قل من دمال دينا جياناوي نفسياوي فكريوي يعني هنا ترصد ليوت هي بالا خداي انه تعداك قلكي خارجي يعني هما انسان جار هناك تدي قوتنا كي جيكي تدكي عاجز دبه يدليها بدي الاجا ايفي بصاله عاجزيه وهاتي دي.
لما تتعلمين كل
What's astonishing is that these women have been through so much, and then at the end of their captivity, when they think that is it, this is freedom, they're then told to make this inconceivable decision that most of us just wouldn't be able to cope with. I don't think anyone really believes that ISIS has gone. There's a female regiment within the coalition forces, and they are preparing for the return of ISIS. And most particularly, their focus is trying to rescue those Yazidi women and children who are still held captive. They train and they learn to fire guns exceedingly expertly because they still have a goal in sight.
يعني وقتنا كي توصل راكمنا مش بو سلاحي هم مش بو تولا جني ازيدي مش بو يكو جارك الدين يعني أقرب مخبر ورده كم جني ازيدي بر ورده بكم هيبت نتاني جني ازيدي قشتي جناك و إيريش سر ورده قاربين وان جنا بباريزن كو جارك دي دوباره افتش تشي نبا كوجن إدي في إشي نكشين نين قتل كرن نين تاوس كرن يعني أفتشتانا وصو جارك دي دوباره شبو سري جنان هاي مسرح شبو يرا كريا مش بو باراستنا جن يعني نتاني جنين يزيدي شبو قشتي جنان.
The female wing of the coalition forces were desperately trying to stop a re-emergence of ISIS by carrying out these regular raids. They have to, because they're trying to stop the build-up of arms and weapons, trying to break up the gangs that are operating in there, largely run by ISIS. They want to go through the entire camp, separate everybody, get them out of their tents. They find all sorts. Everyone is considered a suspect, even tiny little children. So they use these raids to thoroughly go through, line by line, every tent. What they're looking for at this stage is any hidden bunkers, any hidden weapons, and they're finding them all over the place. They know that ISIS is trying to move ahead of them. And so they'll smuggle the weapons, they'll hide them in little bunkers that they've dug under their tents, they'll move the contraband from tent to tent, they'll move the slaves from tent to tent, they'll hide it on rooftops. They'll do anything they can to keep one step ahead of the troops who are hunting for all of this. They'll find half-made, homemade bombs, they'll find knives, they'll find a whole range of weapons. They'll find tunnels. Some of them incredibly elaborate tunnels. Where there appears to have been evidence, certainly suggestion, that somebody's been held there against their will. Every Yazidi woman who's rescued faces this most extraordinarily difficult Hobson's choice. To ensure your own survival, you are probably going to have to give up your children.
احنا عندنا يعني هناك يعني صحيح يعني يزيدين ما يستقبلوا يعني مسلمين. صحيح يعني مو بس صحيح ما جهالي وهاي، بس ما حد راح يستقبلهم. اللين يعني هيكون جهة دواعش ومسلمين ما حد راح يستقبلهم. رأيي يعني ها هي يعني ذا عاد شو اسوي يعني ها هي اروح على اهليهم عاد هاليكم وها هي. فعاد صعبة وهاي حيل صعبة حيل يعني فراقهم ها، بس ها يعني ها يعني مجبورين يعني ها هي.
Can you explain why they have to give up their children, though?
يعني بريار شي هاتي نا شخصي ما وشخصي إيتا ويكيد نا يعني بريارك مجلسة عامة هاري ساري كي بريار درخصين يعني واجي وبين نبل عصبة بريار درخصين جبو باراسنا أخوة بريار درخصين.
يلا نمشي.
دمان نبي داعش تبروان تيكوتن تي بيران بتشوف فرمان هاتي ساري وان يعني جبو سبا ما مثال يعني سبا أزارك خربرنو چون بقريان جمال بات أخوة جيران دردور مالبات وحاجسيا بكن يك هر جماني بما كاباوي بيقول لك كريد داعش يعني أفجيوك إهانة كج مالبات تيرتي يعني.
I think it was incredibly hard for her, but Kovan made the decision to return home by herself. We've seen a constant stream of Yazidis being rescued and being returned to their families. And they're usually scenes of utter joy. Sweets are thrown, songs are sung, you know, there's lots of hugging, there's lots of kissing, crying with joy. But life isn't going to be the same for them. I don't think it's ever going to be the same. And they're still facing a mountain of difficulties.
The problem that the Yazidis are faced is current situation that most of them are living in refugee camp. We have close to the city of Al-Hol in northern Iraq 15 camps with about between 250 and 300,000 Yazidis. 10 years after the trauma and after the genocide, they still have no perspective. And this makes the integration as well for the family, as well in the society, very difficult.
Kovan might be free, but there are an estimated 2,500 Yazidi women who are still in captivity. Some are in the detention camps in northeast Syria. Others are in hiding with their children. And others are in third countries, still with ISIS members. The suffering of the Yazidis is far from over. They still don't feel safe. Their homeland's still in ruins. There are no reparations, and there's very little, if any, justice. And for those lucky enough to be freed, ISIS has somehow perpetuated the pain of their genocide by leaving mothers with a decision that no woman would ever want to be faced with. But despite all of this, some Yazidi survivors have really led from the front, refused to be beaten by ISIS, spoken at international arenas, demanded justice, refused to be forgotten by the world. And they are some of the most resilient, most determined, most courageous women that I've ever met.